keeping updated and acting on the information. Also want to thank some folks who went the extra mile in the last 24 hours. Custodial staff at schools. We had about 250 schools around the city where there was some particular potential for flooding. About 250 schools where custodial staff stayed overnight to make sure there were no problems. Thankfully, all those schools opened fully without any difficulty today. We had teams out dropping sandbags around key areas, particularly in Queens. We had 4,500 catch basins cleaned by DEP. Sanitation's been out there. Everyone has been doing a great job dealing with this challenge. Hopefully now we've seen the worst of it, and over the next couple of hours, again, the worst of the rain will pass. But we are going to remain vigilant throughout. Again, expect some impact even into tomorrow. To give you an update, our Acting Emergency Management Commissioner, Andy Demora. Andy, are you there?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Just a quick update. So the National Weather Service, we still have a flash flood watch in effect till 6 p.m. this evening. As the mayor had mentioned, we had approximately 3 inches of rain that has fallen already, and we could see totals of 3 to 4 inches with local higher amounts through tomorrow. And we are experiencing those winds gusts up to 40 miles an hour. And we will continue to monitor, of course, the weather in close contact with the National Weather Service and our third-party forecasting service. A couple of impacts. There haven't been many significant at this point, but we are staying vigilant. Our Emergency Operations Center is open since last night and will stay open through the remainder of the storm. We activated our flash flood emergency plan on Sunday. And with those winds, we want to make sure we're staying vigilant with that. We have our downtree task force on alert, and as well as our tow truck task force. We continue to host daily interagency conference calls with agency partners to coordinate the city's response to the storm. And some of those impacts, we had some roads that had some flooding, but all are passable. Some of those were on the FDR, Cross Bronx, BQE, and Grand Central, but we have crews on the scene to address those conditions. The MTA is reporting Staten Island rail service is suspended between Huguenot and Tottenville in both directions because of flooding, but no other disruptions on subways with the MTA. There are minor delays at area airports, but please check your local carrier before leaving home. PD, FD, and emergency management responders are monitoring roadway and neighborhood conditions. And we encourage everybody, please sign up for Notify NYC, the city's official emergency communications program, by go to nyc.gov/notify-NYC or calling 311 to get the latest information and the alerts from emergency management. And lastly, I want to thank all of our agency partners, including DEP, DOT, Sanitation, FDPD, and all the hardworking staff at emergency management who have been working around the clock to prepare and respond to this event. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Andy. I want to thank you and everyone at Emergency Management, and also all the good men and women who serve New York City who were out there yesterday evening, overnight even, like I said, those custodians, the folks cleaning the catch basins. A lot of people did a lot of hard work in the last 24 hours to make sure we came through this smoothly. Thank you to all of our city employees who just once again have shown incredible devotion. Again, we're going to keep watching this storm very carefully. Please, everyone, keep informed. We've also seen times where we get real surprises from Mother Nature. So keep informed. We'll keep you updated, and we'll keep taking the appropriate actions to keep all New Yorkers safe. Okay, now, let's go back where we go constantly, and that's the big challenge, the recovery, how we move this city forward, how we come back from COVID. It has to be a recovery for all of us. And we're making great strides. We really are. You can see the life of the city coming back. You can see people doing so much to bring the city back. You can see the investments. We have to make sure as we bring the city back, you know, the president has the phrase, build back better. I love that phrase. It also has to be build back fairer. We have to make sure that the city is fair, that everyone is included. And that means realizing how important the things that people depend on in their neighborhoods are. Look, in the pandemic, people turned to their parks more than ever. Literally, I can't tell you how many times I talked to people who said they had never seen some parts of their local parks before the pandemic because there was no place else to go. They turned to the parks, they discovered new things, they found out how much they loved their parks, how great they were. And our parks team did an amazing job. They had demands put on them like never before, and they made it work. But one of the key things was to make sure that we invest in parks and communities that did not get their fair share over the years. And that's why we created the Community Parks Initiative in 2014 at the beginning of the administration. The idea was, yeah, we love our big famous parks, the sort of big, bold name parks that have lots and lots of support from the surrounding community, from the philanthropic world, business world. That's great. That's really great for all New Yorkers. But what about our community parks? What about the parks that aren't so famous, that didn't get the attention and love and investment they deserved? A lot of them are in places that many, many people depend on those parks. A lot of them are in communities where folks don't make a lot of money and need those parks. We say it, and it's true. For some people, their local park is where they go on their summer vacation because they can't afford to go anyplace else. So we, from the beginning, said we're going to reach those parks in all 5 boroughs, and 67 parks from the beginning have been improved, invested in, reimagined. $425 million in new funding from the beginning to help make sure that we are helping these parks, and we're going to now put more and more in. 10 new parks that we are investing in, that we're going to be continuing this investment for years to come, because it's so important to get it right. It's so important to help our communities. And these are the parks, and you're seeing some of these images, that people turn to, families turn to, kids turn to. It is the core of their life. I've heard people talk about their neighborhood park like the most important part of their growing up was the wonderful experiences they had in the park. We've got to be there for every community. I want you to hear from someone who really believes in this initiative and is now continuing to deepen it with her efforts. And I really appreciate her and her team. This is a labor of love for them. Our Parks Commissioner, Gabrielle Fialkoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is so exciting to join you today and share this good news with New Yorkers all across this city. As the mayor noted, during the pandemic, we have all learned that our parks are not a luxury, but a necessity. The Community Parks Initiative is built on this principle. CPI has already touched the lives of over 500,000 New Yorkers by transforming their relationships with their neighborhood parks. Since it was first launched in 2014, we've successfully revamped 62 neighborhood playgrounds, with another 5 currently in process, putting over $300 million to work. Now we add 100 more parks. CPI is central to this administration's legacy in parks and open space. It has changed the way we approach neighborhood parks in 3 ways. First, CPI is about equity. We focus on community parks that have been overlooked by previous administrations, parks that have gone untouched for more than 2 decades. Second, CPI is about engagement. In fact, it changed the way we now build every park. Now, thanks to CPI, all parks projects begin with gathering the community together to learn what they want to see in their park. Third, CPI is built on partnership. We work with local groups to program and volunteer in these parks, extending and expanding the power of the investments we make. We're not only building parks, we're building communities. After today's announcement, our next step will be to hold community sessions for the next tranche of 10 parks. We will be reaching out to New Yorkers in each targeted to communities to learn what they want to see in their brand new parks. 167 vital community parks renovated and re-envisioned for the next generation. This is the legacy of the de Blasio administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you again. You and your team have really embraced this initiative in all these last 8 years, and now with your leadership, making it go farther and farther. Really, really appreciate the great effort, and it's going to leave a positive impact for decades to come on this city. As someone who believes in this, someone who has been championing it, helping us get it done in the city council, and he understands how important it is to invest in the parks that aren't so famous but serve hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. He's an energetic voice for parks investment. He's the chair of the Council Committee on Parks and Recreation, Councilmember Peter Koo. Is the council member there? There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm City Council Member Peter Koo. I'm Chair of the Parks Committee. It became increasingly clear throughout the pandemic that our parks need to be considered essential infrastructure. When the city shut down, our parks remained the only place open for New Yorkers to relax, to exercise, and to decompress from the stress of a citywide lockdown. Like other agencies, parks felt the effects of severe budget cuts, 14% of its budget. Those cuts, however, were the second largest of every city agency. During this time, some parks fared better than others. Those with conservancies or those with more historic investments survived the pandemic, but too many of our parks and open spaces that were neglected even before the pandemic fell into even further disrepair. But the fact remains that not every neighborhood has equal access to capital, and many of our parks that continue to struggle do so because of time of underinvestment. The Community Parks Initiative is one of the many buckets of funding the city can use to correct this problem. By ensuring lower income, high density areas have access to the funding that need to be refurbished and reconstruct their aging park infrastructure, we can make sure every neighborhood has equitable investment in their most cherished public spaces. So I would like to thank the mayor for prioritizing this issue and for taking a big step towards realizing the mission of making parks essential infrastructures for New York City. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, council member. Thank you for your intense support for this initiative. And I want to emphasize, in the capital plan we just announced, $425 million over the next 10 years to keep building out this community parks initiative, a huge investment in the parks at the grassroots. So today, we're making a commitment to the future, $425 million in new funding for community parks in all 5 boroughs. This is the kind of impact that will last and last and last. As you heard from Commissioner Fialkoff, some of these parks have not gotten invested in decades. Now we get it right. We bring them to a beautiful, modern, state-of-the-art place so communities can enjoy them, and then that will last for decades to come. So a good day all around. Thank you very much, council member.
Thank you.
Everybody, as we think about the investments we have to make, we think about our recovery, we got to think about resiliency too. We're getting another reminder today from Mother Nature, but this is also a time when we think about one of the toughest moments, arguably the #1 natural disaster in the history of New York City, and we're just about at the anniversary 9 years ago when Hurricane Sandy hit, hurricane and nor'easter together, a superstorm, and what a horrible impact, how many thousands of lives harmed, people affected for the rest of their lives, families who lost loved ones. That is a moment, any of us who experienced it, we will never ever forget. And I went all over the city in the aftermath of Sandy. I saw so much devastation, and it was a reminder we have to keep making investments in resiliency because this is the world we're living in because of climate change. We talked last week about fighting back against climate change, doing the really foundational things we have to do to stop the climate crisis. That's job one for all of us, but the resiliency investments are necessary. We've been continuing to build upon the original $20 billion resiliency plan that came out of the Hurricane Sandy era. We're doing more and more, and we need to do more and more. So today we're announcing new investments as part of our capital plan, major new investments, $110 million in climate investments for resiliency actions, and we're focusing on the very vulnerable areas of Lower Manhattan. We know we know that Lower Manhattan is one of the places where you have the combination of the most people living and working, that's also lowest in terms of sea level, and that we have a vulnerability there that must be addressed. So the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Project will include the Brooklyn Bridge area, the Montgomery Coastal Resiliency area, Battery Coastal Resiliency area, a series of projects around the Seaport, all going around Lower Manhattan to address sea level rise and the flooding that we see from coastal storms. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people between the folks who live in Lower Manhattan and the folks who work there who are affected. We're talking about one of the greatest concentrations of subway lines anywhere in the city. This is an area that really needs to be protected. So this week, City Hall in your borough focused on Manhattan. Yesterday, we were focusing on great initiatives like open streets and shared streets, open spaces. Today, we're focusing on resiliency for Manhattan, and someone who has been sounding the alarm for a long time and fighting for these kind of investments, and she loves her borough deeply, the borough president of Manhattan, Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Manhattan Week, Mr. Mayor. And I'm also glad that you were at the museum this morning. That was really special to be at Studio Museum in Harlem. That's really Manhattan, so thank you very much. And I do want to thank you for all of your investments. I think particularly on resiliency. You and I know that Catherine McVeigh Hughes, who was chair of Community Board 1 and is still active, was the sounder of the alarm of this area. And I also want to thank you because it's not only Lower Manhattan, but your administration has been phenomenal supporting the East River Park. I would say that's another place where we're putting in a lot of effort to make sure that there's no flooding or storm surge there in the future. It's a $2 billion project. It's controversial, but what isn't controversial? And I'm supportive of that, very supportive. I also want to say, just so you know, in terms of Lower Manhattan, there's something called Brooklyn Bridge Beach, which I had to convince EDC not to put a, like a high up viewing stand, but more we're going to be able to go down into the water. And Margaret Chin and I were able to pull that off. So in many cases, administration has been very helpful. But this investment is the first meaningful and concrete step to come out of sort of the FIDI Seaport Climate Master Plan. And I know that that's something that your staff has been working on tremendously. It is the birthplace and a place that you and I know is the location of the South Street Seaport Museum, a museum that you too love, and I certainly do. It's 290,000 workers, 62,000 residents and growing, and then 500,000 commuters who come to work, as you said, on all those amazing subways. It's got historic and cultural gems. And so really appreciate this down payment. It's going to take billions to get it right. And I know that by 2050, over a third of the buildings in Lower Manhattan will be at risk of storm surge. We know exactly what happened with Sandy. And it's always very revealing when you go to the South Street Seaport Museum on the pier and you see how high up Sandy went. You can't ever forget it. So the commitment today will unlock additional funding and pave the way for future investments from all levels of government. We don't ever forget the federal and the state and the city. That's what's going to be needed. And I'm certainly committed to working with the local community through the design process to ensure this project reflects its priorities. And I know that you'll do the same. So thank you for being leading Manhattan Week. You know I do love this borough. I'm not so good about the other boroughs, but I love our borough. And I look forward to continuing. Parks are part of the same effort. It's open space. They're often the place where resiliency takes place in addition. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of the week and all of the opportunities.
Thank you. Equally, Borough President, I look forward to doing some great things together this week and celebrating some great new actions and initiatives for Manhattan. Hey, I want to thank you personally. You and I have so many times talked about South Street Seaport and the Seaport Museum. We go back for decades together, and this is one of the things that we just both feel in our hearts, how important it is to protect that heritage. And we got to be a great city because we were a coastal city. Now we're experiencing some of the challenges of being a coastal city, but we've got to preserve that history and that heritage, and you've really led the way on that. I want to thank you so much for that. everybody now wants you to hear from a couple of the leaders in this administration who have done outstanding work with their teams on resiliency. And they're going to give you a flavor of some of the other things we're going to be doing, because it's so important to focus on how we stay ahead of a changing world and protect these precious parts of our city. First of all, I want you to hear from the president of our Economic Development Corporation, Rachel Loeb.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I also want to thank Borough President Brewer for her continued partnership. Today's investment sends a signal that there is no time to waste. Climate change is creating stronger and more devastating storms. And at EDC, we take our coastal resiliency work very seriously. Throughout the city, we are working to ensure that our coastline is protected to lessen the impact of storm surges and severe weather. This project in particular will safeguard one of the most low-lying vulnerable areas, the Seaport District, and it is a first step in making sure that we're protecting residents, business owners, and infrastructure from flooding. As you know, I like to say that there's no economic health without climate health, and resiliency is a key part of that. And with this $110 million funding, we will raise up the existing bulkhead from the Brooklyn Bridge to Pier 17. This is critical, immediate, and expeditious protection. We're also going to be making critical storm drainage improvements, and most importantly, improve our waterfront access at the same time. These efforts will protect infrastructure, residents, and jobs, and not to mention offer the area protection from the present-day 50-year storm surge. But this project is a long-term plan, and we know more must be done to safeguard the city, and it's going to take the full support of our federal partners and federal funding. True coastal resiliency will take more than 2 decades to achieve, and we need to make sure that we create a resilient waterfront. In this case, in Lower Manhattan, all the way from the Battery to the East Coast Resiliency Area. This project will fill a critical gap to protect Lower Manhattan. It's one of our largest business districts. It's 75% of our city's subways pass through this area, and they connect to critical ferry connections, and they connect all New Yorkers to all the boroughs and to all their jobs. So we need to work together to ensure that we are protecting New Yorkers and their livelihoods. Thank you so much for this investment and this partnership.
Thank you so much. And now I want to turn to another one of our colleagues, and she's been leading the way on resiliency for years now in our team. She and her colleagues have done great work keeping major projects moving. A lot of parts of our city are safer now and more resilient because of her efforts, and more to come. The Director of the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency, Janie Bavishi.
Thank you, Mayor. 9 years ago, Sandy devastated our city, from the Rockaways to Staten Island to Brooklyn to Lower Manhattan. The power went out, plunging us into darkness. Water poured into homes, businesses, and tunnels. The destruction was unprecedented. Sandy was a turning point. Across the city, we began advancing bold solutions to prepare for not only more coastal storms, but other hazards facing our city, including extreme heat, intense precipitation, and chronic tidal flooding made worse by rising sea levels. There is no silver bullet to the risks posed by climate change. That's why we are implementing a multi-layered strategy in all 5 boroughs. We're developing ambitious solutions to meet unparalleled challenges, and we are spending tens of billions of dollars to make New Yorkers safer. This investment is a critical step in our efforts to protect our residents, protect our city, and reimagine our waterfront in the face of climate change. We have the chance now to ensure New York City is more resilient to climate threats for generations to come. One thing that is certain is there is no time to waste.
Amen. That is the truest message there. There is no time to waste, and we keep at it every day. And Janie, thank you to you and your colleagues for feeling that urgency and acting on it. And someone else, one more person I want to hear from, who's been a leading advocate, a leading voice for the right kind of investments to stop the climate crisis and to address resiliency. She fought hard for state legislation to address climate change, including the $3 billion Restore Mother Nature Bond Act. Absolutely crucial. My pleasure to introduce the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters, Julie Tai.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mayor Blasio. We've heard this already, but climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time. Extreme flooding and storms are occurring more frequently, and it's not a future problem, it's a now problem. With this nor'easter as the latest storm to hit New York, after we've seen coastal and inland flooding earlier this year from Henri and from Ida. And we need to take immediate action to protect people from the effects of climate change now through resiliency efforts and infrastructure upgrades. And that's why NYLCV and our partners are fighting for climate and resiliency funding as part of the Build Back Better Act. And as you mentioned, the proposed Environmental Bond Act, which actually now Governor Hochul has proposed to increase to $4 billion, and that's going to be on the ballot next year. So we'll be talking about that a lot over the next year. As we approach this anniversary of Sandy, it is amazing to see this additional funding for the Lower Manhattan Climate Resiliency Project. It's a great step forward to protect some of our most vulnerable areas of Lower Manhattan, as we heard from the commissioner. We hope that this project can be an example of what the city can do on all of its coasts, implementing resilient infrastructure, protect our people, our homes, and local businesses from flooding. We must continue to invest heavily in green infrastructure through street trees and our urban forests, by building more parks in low-income neighborhoods, and by taking street space away from cars and giving it back to pedestrians. We can build a more sustainable, safe, and livable city that is resilient in the face of climate change if we transform our hard infrastructure into porous green spaces that absorb rainwater instead of causing runoff. So we are especially thankful to you, Mayor de Blasio, to EDC, to the Mayor's Office of Resiliency for championing this project, for making sure that you're investing in it. And we hope that the next administration will continue supporting and expanding upon the Lower Manhattan Climate Resiliency Project to create a more resilient New York City. And I'm also grateful for the announcement that you made earlier about the Community Parks Initiative. As you know, this is a big priority for the New York League of Conservation Voters and the entire Play Fair for Parks campaign. So thank you for both.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you to everyone at the League of Conservation Voters. You guys have been amazing, continuing to advocate and very effectively for these changes, and we're right there with you. Thank you so much. Okay, it's time for our indicators, and our first indicator today, reaching close to another milestone. We're going to get there very soon. We're almost at 12 million doses of the vaccine administered to date. As of today, 11,964,753. Number two, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19. Today's report is 93 patients, confirmed positivity level of 19.79%. Hospitalization rate continuing. We're seeing great success here. 0.49 per 100,000 New Yorkers. And then number three, new reported cases on a 7-day average. Today's report, 759 cases. Let me say a few words in Spanish. I want to go back to the weather we're experiencing today and what we're doing to address it. Nuestra ciudad está preparada para las fuertes lluvias durante todo el día. Hemos llevado recursos a Queens, limpiado los drenajes de lluvia, y seguimos vigilando los vecindarios en riesgo. Mantente seguro y seco, Nueva York. With that, let's turn to our colleagues in the media, and please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
Good morning. We will now begin our Q&A. As a reminder, we are joined by Dr. Mitch Katz, Dr. Dave Choksi, Parks Commissioner Gabrielle Fialkoff, Acting Emergency Management Commissioner Andy Demora, Director of the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency Janie Bavishi, and President of the Economic Development Corporation Rachel Loeb. Our first question today goes to Andrew Siff from WNBC.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone on the call. Mayor, with regard to the weather, can you talk about how you made the determination yesterday and last night not to have an OEM storm briefing, not to present sort of a more urgent message to New Yorkers? What was it that let you believe that this could be handled differently?
Andrew, it's been just the constant updates. What we've done now is to bring in additional forecasting services beyond National Weather Service to constantly monitor, and what we saw yesterday morning has held throughout. We didn't see a major change in the storm, thank God, and the warnings that were being provided during the day yesterday proved to be consistent with what we saw as we went into the late night last night and again this morning. So it's all about the facts and the ability to confirm the facts. We did a lot more looking at what the storm was doing in the areas to the west of us, several hours ahead, and we saw consistency in the report. So luckily, again, we like when the reports are right and the reports tell us we're not going to have a big problem, and this time that held. Go ahead, Andrew.
children getting the vaccine. The best timing we've seen is that when the FDA likely offers its committee authorization today, and then the CDC authorizes a week from today, the vaccine could actually be shipped for children so that the first shots are by the end of next week. I don't know if Dr. Choksi could maybe lay out when he anticipates potentially the very first day might be that children are getting shots. And do you anticipate having those shots available at elementary schools across New York City?
So Andrew, let me start, and I'll turn to Dr. Choksi and Dr. Katz. First of all, we're really excited about this. This is fantastic news that our youngest New Yorkers are going to be eligible for the vaccine. As you're going to hear from the doctors, we're looking at late next week or the week after, and that's fantastic. We're getting ready and excited, and I think there's going to be a whole lot of energy among parents to bring their younger kids in. We have a lot of sites ready, as always, and we're certainly going to consider what we need to do in our schools as well. But we may be starting this on a weekend, depending on the details, and we're going to rely on all the sites and all the centers we've had so far that have worked so well as we begin the effort. Dr. Choksi, then Dr. Katz.
Thank you, sir. I want to start by just echoing your enthusiasm. We know how much this matters to parents of 5 to 11-year-olds who have been waiting for this. There are several steps to the sequence, which is particularly important when we're talking about pediatric vaccination, because we want to make sure that the most rigorous process is followed to ensure that the vaccine is safe and effective, as we have seen before. So today, as you mentioned, Andrew, the FDA Advisory Committee is meeting and deliberating on it. Assuming that that all goes well, it will go formally to the FDA for authorization. And then subsequently next week, the CDC will take it up as well. So with respect to a timeline, the very end of next week, I think is the absolute earliest, but I think it's more likely that it will be the week after that. But regardless of the precise date, we have been and will continue to prepare between now and then to make sure that, as the mayor said, all of our sites will be ready and people have the information that they need for this to be a safe and effective addition to our vaccination campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Katz, you want to add? Dr. Katz? Maybe on mute. This is something we always have to warn people on. We don't have Dr. Katz, I guess. Okay, we'll bring him back for the next one. Go ahead.
Our next question goes to Marla from WCBS 880.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. We were in East Elmhurst this morning, and residents are very fearful of this storm. We saw a crew installing new pipe on Astoria Boulevard. This is a month after Hurricane Ida. I'm wondering what's been done to improve the infrastructure in these neighborhoods and to prevent flooding from this storm and future storms?
So Marla, there's a variety of things, some which have been acted on immediately and some of which are going to take a longer time, obviously. Take a look at the report we did that came out a few weeks ago on everything we learned that we have to do as a result of Ida. There are some areas we could make immediate improvements. Some of those community spaces called community driveways, we have an initiative that's going to be doing work on them immediately. We have some of the plans that we had already invested in Queens, for example, the $2 billion for Southeast Queens. That's been continued and in some cases sped up. Then the kinds of things I talked about, the immediate reactions, having the custodians do the extra work to prepare schools, distributing the sandbags, the extra work to clean the drains. All of that was helpful in the last 24 hours. But the bigger investments to really prepare ourselves for massive storms, as we said, we're going to need an immense amount of federal and state help, and that's going to be a longer time frame. So we got different pieces running, but they're all running constantly to get this to be a more resilient city. Go ahead, Marla.
And can you talk about the new notification system for those flood-prone areas? At what point do you issue an advisory, and how is that message being delivered? And do you feel that there's a need to open shelters during this storm?
No, not during this storm so far as we're seeing, Marla, thankfully. Right now, again, we're talking about totals in terms of rainfall that, thank God, are within very reasonable levels in terms of not causing the kinds of flooding anywhere near what we saw during Ida. Remember, the total amount of this storm so far has been, in many areas, less than what we saw in Ida in just the course of an hour. So, it's a stark contrast. What we would do, we obviously considered using the alert systems. We considered whether we needed to even think about things like travel bans or evacuations, but none of that, we did not reach the level for any of that in this case as we monitored through the night. None of it reached that kind of level. But to your question going forward, we would, if we saw more serious, more dangerous weather coming, we'd tell people early as we saw it, get ready for an alert. We would use the cell phone alert system, which is very effective. We'd have people going door to door. If it was a mandatory evacuation, that would include NYPD and FDNY, telling people they had to move out. Of course, travel ban. All of these tools are available. And when we see even the possibility of needing those type of tools, the first time we see it, we would announce it and then put them into effect the moment we saw that kind of danger emerging.
Our next question goes to Chris from the New York Daily News.
Good morning, Mayor. Wanted to ask you about any updates on whether there were any evacuations or incidents of flooding during last night's rainfall, if you have any, update on actual emergency actions being taken.
Yeah, I'll bring Andy Demora in, Chris, but just to say, from what we have reported at the top of this press conference, thank God we're not seeing the kinds of negative impact that we obviously were preparing to address. When we think about things like the flooding that could cause danger to people's lives, first and foremost, of course, trees coming down, electricity out, all the things that we prepare for. Thankfully, we have not seen those kind of negative impacts in any major way. Andy, why don't you give just a quick update on all of that for everyone again?
Oh, thank you, sir. We didn't see any significant impacts, any kind of roadways throughout the city that had some flooding, momentarily closures. Crews are on the scene rapidly to at least alleviate the 1 or 2 lanes while they continue to de-water. Just another update as well, the MTA's reported that the Staten Island Railway has resumed service.
Yeah, and Andy, on just clarifying, trees down, houses or customers without electricity, what do you have?
Very minimal trees down citywide. Currently, we have approximately 4 or 5 trees down citywide and 200 customers without power, and Con Ed is on the scene.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. And switching gears a bit, yesterday there was a very large anti-vaccine mandate protest that took place on Brooklyn Bridge. I was there speaking to a lot of the workers who were there, and one thing I noticed was that you had protesters scaling the medians on the Brooklyn Bridge. You had the protesters blocking traffic, but police officers were by and large standing by, not arresting anyone. And at the same time, on the other side of City Hall, you had taxi workers being arrested for blocking traffic. So I'm just wondering what you think of that disparity there, where at one protest you had police arresting people and at the other it seemed like there was no enforcement whatsoever.
Yeah, I need to get a review from the NYPD of what happened at each. I need to understand if there was planned civil disobedience. Obviously, in a case where there's a planned civil disobedience, people intend to get arrested and want that to happen, and that's one thing. With the march, my understanding is the bridge was closed off, but I want to get the full rundown on that. I appreciate the question, Chris. So let me get more information. I'll have my team get back to you today.
Our next question goes to Dana from the New York Times.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I first was wondering if you could talk more about your decision-making regarding the Fifth Avenue busway and what it is that business owners, including Steve Roth, said that convinced you to delay it, and also how that delay jives with your concerns about climate change, because obviously the plan was to prioritize mass transit traffic over private vehicle traffic.
Yeah, Dana, to me, this was a classic example of the left hand and the right hand. A very good thing, the busway, which we will do. But when the decision was made around the timing and the implementation, the folks in our team who focus on economic development and focus on recovery really weren't looped properly with the people making the transportation decisions, because it's kind of obvious that's an area that is profoundly important to the city in terms of our economy, in terms of tourism, in terms of retail stores, which have been hurting, really hurting in this pandemic. And the notion that we might disrupt at the holiday time, obviously a pivotal time of the year in many senses, especially, thank God, as tourism is starting to come back, including the international tourism. It just didn't make sense to time the busway implementation exactly at that moment. It made sense to let that season pass and then move forward with the busway. So I think the input I got helped me to realize that the left hand and right hand had not been well coordinated and we had to do something better, and I like where we ended up. Go ahead, Dana.
Thanks. On a completely unrelated topic, can you speak a little bit about your plans for supervised injection sites? It looks like you're sort of accelerating those plans before you leave office.
Dana, first of all, I'll tell you, we don't have a specific announcement to make today. I can tell you I believe in overdose prevention centers, which I think is a much better way. I'm not criticizing your term of art. It is one of the terms of art, what you said, but I call it overdose prevention centers because I think it gets to the heart of what this is. It's to save lives, stop people from overdosing who could be saved, and of course, to every way help them towards treatment and support. So this is an idea that has worked in Canada, it's worked in Europe, it's an idea whose time has come. But there are some real issues to work through, particularly with the state and federal government. So we're not ready to make any specific announcements yet, but it's something we continue to work on energetically.
Our next question goes to Amanda from Politico.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Good, Amanda. How you been?
I'm doing well, thanks. So I wanted to follow up on Dana's question. So I reported last night that you have directed your health department to move forward with this pilot program. And so I wanted to know why now? Like, what's the timing for doing this research now, considering the feasibility study was requested in 2016 and you waited until 2018 to release it before punting to the state?
Yeah, Amanda, respect you and I respect your question, but I don't agree with that characterization. We worked on this a lot. When I first heard the idea, there were things I found powerful and meaningful about it and things that really raised concerns. We spent real time and energy researching what had happened around this country with nascent efforts, Canada, Europe. We sent, in fact, folks to see the examples in Toronto and Vancouver. We brought the NYPD into the discussion deeply. It was a very complex and thoughtful process that led me to believe it was the right thing to do. Then we ran into the challenge at the time of the then Trump administration and the position their Justice Department took on this issue. And that was one problem, and we also knew the only way we could move forward is with the state of New York fully embracing it. That was the only possible shield to help us address the federal issues. It was the right time to turn to the state. I really am saying this from the heart. We couldn't do it without the state being willing to support. And that was the missing link. We did appeal to the state. We didn't get a response. Along came COVID, and you're not going to be surprised that our focus has been on addressing COVID. But now that finally we're making profound progress on COVID, I wanted us to move. We have a new administration in Washington, a new administration in Albany. It was the right time to do something on this topic while we could finally have the kind of potential cooperation we needed. So I'm very hopeful. Again, we don't have the final specific plan, but I'm very hopeful on this. Go ahead, Amanda.
Great, thank you. One of the locations I heard floated was in East Harlem. And I think we spoke about this a couple weeks back in terms of looking at certain neighborhoods and seeing which neighborhoods have their fair share of services, and how some neighborhoods say, you know, we have too many methadone clinics. We have too many services that are aimed at, quote unquote, like undesirable populations. And so I was curious if you could speak a little bit more to, kind of that issue more broadly of making sure that services are available in neighborhoods where people need it, but at the same time, not overwhelming these neighborhoods with services specified for, either drug users or homeless people.
Profound issue, Amanda, really. I think we've got a couple of different pieces here. We've got the question of, with overdose prevention centers, we really want buy-in and support. We want that from the appropriate district attorney. We want that from the local council member. When I put forward the plan years ago, I said those were two of the key components to me. Going places where both the district attorney and the council member believed in the approach. So that's one consideration. Second, clearly where the need is greatest. And we know the neighborhoods in the city where overdoses have been the biggest problem. And having it local to where people are really matters. I 100% appreciate we've got to keep working on equity in all things. But when it comes to literally life-saving overdose prevention centers, they've got to be where people need them. And we know where some of those neighborhoods are, and that's where the focus should be. And broadly, with Fair Share, having facilities in proportion to the community's need is the right way to go. This is one of the things we've done with our homeless shelter siting, making sure that people could, if they, God forbid they become homeless, that they could stay in the community they come from as part of their transition back to the community. So that's how we've been trying to figure out the balance, but it really comes down to, first and foremost, where can you serve people best?
Our next question goes to Elizabeth from Gothamist.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. A few weeks ago, Eric Adams was at a community health clinic in the Bronx, and he called on the city to scale up its $100 vax incentive program to these kinds of smaller community-based providers. Can you comment on that and explain why the city can't find some way to allow these community-based clinics to offer their patients the $100 vax incentive as opposed to, redirecting them to a city clinic?
It's a great question, Elizabeth, and I'm glad that Eric Adams raised this, because when we started this, we really wanted to move it quickly, and it had a profound impact. A $100 incentive really had a profound impact in terms of getting more people vaccinated. And the way we could do it effectively and quickly was through the center-run sites. I would like to get the community-based sites into this. I think it would be ideal. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Choksi, Dr. Katz, putting you on the spot, but in a good way. I think this would be the next logical step. Could either of you tell us if there's any work being done now to see how we do that? And if not, we will start doing that work. Dr. Choksi?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thanks, Elizabeth, for this important question. This is actually something that we have been actively thinking about, particularly for federally qualified health centers, which are the community-based clinics that particularly serve low-income populations and have a particular focus in the neighborhoods that we most want to reach. So I'm grateful, actually, Rachel Loeb, who's also on the call this morning, and EDC have been tremendous partners in this. And so we are actively working to expand the $100 incentive, which, as the mayor said, has been quite successful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
My other question is on after Hurricane Ida, you said that the city was going to start compiling a complete and accurate count of basement residents. I wanted to ask how that's going and whether that's a project you expect to get done before the end of your term.
Well, in the report, Elizabeth, we made clear it is absolutely moving right now. It will happen. It will happen ahead of next hurricane season, but not before I leave office in the next few weeks. The idea there is it is a big undertaking. We literally, our perfect world here is to catalog each and every basement apartment. And so we think that's a project that's going to take 6 to 8 months, but it will get us done ahead of the next hurricane season. So the resources have been put in place, the order's been given, and thankfully the next administration will have that tool ready.
We have time for 2 more questions today. The next question goes to Bob Hennelly from the Chief Leader.
Yes, thanks for taking the call, Mr. Mayor. On New York One, you referenced that several hundred DOE employees had successfully applied for and received a medical exemption from the vaccine mandate. Can your medical experts describe what kind of conditions might merit that kind of exemption?
Sure. I think, Dave, I believe you're pretty current on that list of the kinds of things that apply for an exemption. Give us the rundown.
Yes, certainly. And the first thing to say is that medical exemptions are quite rare because there are very few medical situations that warrant an exemption. One piece of misinformation that I'll just take the opportunity to clear up is that people with underlying health conditions are those that will benefit the most from vaccination. And so we strongly encourage anyone with a chronic condition to get vaccinated, and that is not grounds for a medical exemption. What is grounds is generally followed by what's laid out in the CDC's guidance on this topic. If someone has a severe allergy to the vaccine or one of its components such that they cannot receive any of the 3 vaccines, then that is grounds for medical exemption. We expect that circumstance to be exceedingly rare, but that is one case. And there are sometimes temporary medical exemptions as well. For example, someone who was recently diagnosed with COVID-19 and still in their isolation window, or someone who received monoclonal antibody treatment for recent COVID-19 for up to 3 months after receiving that treatment. So in sum, it's a narrow set of conditions that warrant medical exemption.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Bob.
So, Mr. Mayor, are you concerned about the potential public health patchwork effect in a city where you have mandated all city employees be vaccinated as a term and condition of employment, but the MTA, which has tens of thousands of workers responsible for moving millions of New Yorkers, still has the vaccine or submitting to weekly testing as an option?
Look, I'm a believer in vaccine mandates. I've said this for public sector, private sector. I think every mayor in America, every governor in America should adopt vaccine mandates. I think every CEO in America should adopt vaccine mandates. They work. They work. Look at the huge impact. Since we announced the mandates, including the key to NYC, vaccination levels greatly increased in this city, and COVID levels have gone down, period. So I have a simple view, Bob. Every place that we can put the mandate in, we should, because it works and it's going to save lives. So that's my view. In terms of what it means that there's different standards in different places, we have to do what's right here in New York City. We have to do what's right to protect our employees and the people they serve. And I urge everyone else, follow this path, because it's the thing that will end the COVID era. I really want to remind us what the ultimate goal is to put COVID in our past and allow us to come back to life fully. And this is what really allows it to happen.
Our last question for today goes to Abu from Bangla Patrika.
Hello, Mayor. Good morning.
Good morning, Abu. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good.
Thank you. Mayor, I would like to ask you a question about the taxi driver who are hunger striking since last about 4 or 5 days. What city is thinking about their demand, and what is the plan?
Abu, first of all, I really want to say I have spent time over years and years with taxi drivers, with medallion owners. I feel folks have been through so much, and the human reality here is very painful to me. And there's a lot of reasons this happened, but what I care about is what's happened to the people in the end, and it's been very, very tough. We worked hard to find a solution. We worked with the city council, which passed our budget, including the relief for the taxi drivers. And really, in the end, we're talking about up to $500 million in debt forgiveness. Now, that alone is a big deal, the overall impact, but I want to tell you where we are right now, and I have my notes, in terms of the number of drivers, because it's already been hundreds and hundreds of drivers who are starting down this path. And we've got now the potential of 1,000 drivers who could benefit from this. So right now, as of today, 155 drivers have initiated this debt forgiveness, $20 million in debt being erased right there. Over 1,000 more, we believe, will take advantage of this in the near term with the potential to erase $500 million in debt. And we want to go as far as we can go from there. So I really feel for people, and that's why we have something right now that can help them. And I want every driver to take advantage of this. We'll continue to look at any other tools, any other ways we can help. We really want to find every way we can help, but this is here and now. And I really want to encourage every driver to take advantage of this debt relief. Go ahead, Abu.
The medallion price. They're saying the medallion price, they artificially raised the price about 1.22 million, and now the price is like $80,000. So the people who bought it, now they are in trouble. Is there any intensive or any kind of stimulus to help them?
Well, this is, again, we made a public investment that allows us to get debt relief on a very high level. And this is the thing that right now, and again, many drivers are starting to recognize this because 155 already are taking advantage of it, and it's growing every day. Here is a way to get real debt relief to these drivers. And then we'll keep looking for anything else we can do. But right now, I just want to encourage everyone, even while people are saying we want other things, we want more things, take advantage of this debt relief right now. We can lighten people's burdens right now. $500 million in debt relief is reachable, and that's what I want to focus everyone on and get people that help. Everyone, as we conclude today, I just want to say as per usual, this city deals with a lot of challenges. We've had the weather in the last 24 hours. Thank God it appears to be passing. We deal with the reality of COVID every day, but what is so striking is the resiliency of New Yorkers. And people have fought back through every one of these challenges. We just talked about the Sandy anniversary. I saw such extraordinary acts of compassion and kindness. New Yorkers helping their fellow neighbors in the worst of Sandy. This is who we are. Let's now do that for each other with COVID. Let's get vaccinated. Let's finish this mission. Let's help each other over COVID once and for all. You heard the numbers today, approaching 12 million doses. And our children, we're going to be able to reach our youngest children soon. That's going to be extraordinary. Let's finish the job. Thank you, everybody.